Hello, class. May the force be with you and also with you. Really good to see you guys. Today is Monday, November 2nd. Tomorrow is Tuesday, November 3rd, and I am going to upload this class for your viewing pleasure in the morning. So this is our Tuesday class, and I'm going to lecture a little bit shorter than normal. I'm going to lecture for 45 minutes for this class because I want to give you 15 minutes to complete your quiz, which I just uploaded on Canvas, and it should go live tomorrow morning at 8. So feel free to take the first 10 or 15 minutes of our normal class period and get your quiz done, okay? I also wanted to say that if you look at the reading schedule on Canvas, which again, the reading schedule is very important for this class. If you look at the reading schedule, you will see that we are supposed to be doing Nietzsche this week. In fact, what it says on Canvas on the schedule is Nietzsche documentary. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys 2 class periods to watch the Nietzsche documentary. So in other words, this Thursday and next Tuesday, that is to say, this Thursday, November 5, and then the following Tuesday, November 10, I am not going to record a lecture or do a live stream on my YouTube channel. Instead, what I want you to do is to watch that Nietzsche documentary, okay? Maybe we can do something a little different. Maybe I can have like an alternative live stream session in which we can talk about the documentary, and maybe you can ask me any questions about anything that you want to. If you like that idea, feel free to text me, feel free to email me, and we'll see how that goes, okay? But the third housekeeping note that I have today is that I will begin to grade your papers tomorrow. The paper was due last week. I honestly haven't looked at Canvas this week, so I don't know if all of you turned it in. I have been checking my email though, so I suspect that things are in pretty good shape. And I just wanted to let you know I will begin to grade those papers tomorrow, okay? Great. Y'all, this is our last lecture on Descartes. I felt a little bit bad because we rushed through Descartes, so I wanted to have one more lecture about him. I'm a little bit sad because I left my Descartes book, my copy of the book at my house. I'm at my office right now, and so I was planning on reading some quotes from the various meditations and discussing them. But instead, I'm gonna talk about 2 big themes today. One, I want to continue to talk about systematic doubt and the role that that plays in Descartes' thought. I just think that that's super important for anyone who wants to know how to think philosophically and critically about our culture. Descartes created the modern world in a way, in the sense that he got us to drink the Kool-Aid of certainty. In other words, Descartes has turned us all into default skeptics. So that's why I want to talk about his systematic doubt. I want to talk about his systematic doubt. And then secondly, I want to talk about the ego / the mind / the cogito / the subject. Okay, so those are the 2 things that I want to talk about today. I'm going to talk for about 40 more minutes. And so let's get started with this journey of systematic doubt. I wish that I had a whiteboard. I wish that I had better proficiency with things like PowerPoint, because this is where a picture would be very, very helpful. Because the way that I talk about Descartes' journey of systematic doubt is that he starts on the outside of him. He starts on the outside of him, and then he progressively moves inward into his own self, okay? So the way I think about this, it's almost as if you can draw a series of concentric circles, I don't know if you can see that. There's two concentric circles. And Descartes begins on the outside, and he begins to think about the objects of the world, right? The things that Aristotle regards as composite unities of form and matter, right? Composite unities of form and matter. Aristotle wants to say that all of the things that exist in the world, this iPhone, this pen, the magnolia tree outside my window, all of the things that exist in this world are composite unities of two things, form and matter, right? So when Descartes talks about the objects of the world, birds, chairs, iPhones, pens, he's talking about the same thing that Descartes is, although I'm not saying that he regards them as composite unities of form and matter. I'm not saying that. But when Descartes talks about these objects out there in the world, those are the first thing that he says, I'm going to doubt that those are real. All right. So I'm going to draw a picture of a birdie and a cup. A birdie and a cup. Okay, I don't know if you can see this. Can you see the little birdie and the little cup on the outside? Descartes begins with the things out there in the world, the objects of our everyday experience, like chairs and notebook computers and business cards and people and birds. I already said that. Magnolia trees. He begins with those things, the ordinary things in our lives, and he says, I'm going to doubt that those things are real. By the way, the reason he advocates doubting those things, the reason he thinks that doubting those things is a good idea is because he thinks that our sense perception is not trustworthy, okay? He thinks that our sense perception is not trustworthy. And he also thinks that if you can't be certain of something, then you have no business believing it. Aristotle's kind of Descartes' kind of an all or nothing guy when it comes to epistemology, this notion of how can we know anything at all. He says, if we're going to know anything at all, we have to be certain of it. And you should be thinking of Daedalus's roving figurines that we talked about when we read Plato. So Descartes says we can't trust our sense perception, and therefore we can't be certain that birds and trees and chairs exist. So we're going to doubt those things. Okay. So he starts on the outside of himself, the furthest away that he can, and he doubts those things. But then he begins to move inward. So y'all, you can see that I'm going to draw a little arrow that goes from the outside to the inside. I hope that you can see that. He begins on the outside of him, things way up in the sky, things far, far away. He begins there and he doubts those things. But then he moves in and he says, okay, I've doubted those things. What else can I doubt? Oh, he says, I can doubt the existence of my body. See, he's moving inward into himself and he says, you know what? It seems like I can move my fingers and it seems like I can touch my head. It seems like I can do planks and other forms of Pilates exercises for like 2 minutes at a time. It seems like that. However, I can't be certain of that. And so he says, you know what? I'm going to assume that my body's not real because I can't produce any certainty that it actually exists. And so he begins to doubt his own body, his fingers, his toes, his kneecap. He begins to doubt the existence of his body as well. Okay, so I drew a little picture of Descartes' body. He doubts that, but he doesn't stop there. He continues to doubt things, and he's moving in this inward journey. And he says, not only can I doubt the birds and the cups, not only can I doubt my fingers and legs, but I can also doubt the inner sensations of my body that I seem to experience, right? Things like, have you ever had stomach pains because you were hungry? And have you ever felt your stomach rumbling in that way? He says you can doubt that. Or maybe have you ever have you ever felt your blood pressure rise? Or have you ever felt your heart beginning to beat quickly whenever you get nervous, or maybe butterflies in your tummy whenever you hang out with a boy or a girl that you like, that you're attracted to? All of those things are sort of like physical sensations, but they're on the inside of your body, or at least that's one way of thinking about it. Things like pain, things like stomach rumblings, things like palpitating heartbeats. I'm just going to draw, I wish I could draw a picture of a stomach, but I can't. I'm just going to draw a picture of a heart, okay? He identifies physical experiences on the inside of his body, and he says, you know what? I can doubt that as well. So he doubts that, but he doesn't stop there. He keeps going on this journey inward of systematic doubt. And the next concentric circle of things that he begins to doubt is things like memory and imagination. And he says, you know what? I think that I can remember my 21st birthday, but I can't be certain of that. And so I'm going to go ahead and doubt that as well. I'm going to go ahead and assume that that does not exist as well. And so he doubts that. He doubts all of these things until he gets to one thing at the very, very center of what might be the universe, at the very, very center of his reality, at the very, very center of this journey, the very end point of the journey. Descartes says, aha, I have found something that I cannot doubt the existence of. I found something that's indubitable. That is to say, I've discovered something that's absolutely certain. And y'all, what is that thing? It is the fact that he's doubting, right? That is to say, it's the fact that he's thinking. Descartes says, I cannot doubt that I'm thinking, because if I'm doubting, that I'm necessarily thinking, right? And so he calls this the I think, therefore I am, the cogito ergo sum. In philosophy, this is known by shorthand as the cogito. The cogito is Descartes' mind, Descartes' thought, the fact that Descartes himself is thinking, okay? This is the thing that Descartes says is indubitable, and it is an indubitable foundation that he cannot doubt. Now, at this point, Descartes thinks that he has arrived at a foundation, an indubitable foundation of certainty. And at that point, Descartes says, aha, you know what? Now that I have proved that something exists, now that I have proved that my mind exists, that my subjectivity exists, that I exist as a thinking thing, now that I've proved that that exists, guess what? I can now begin the journey back outward. I can now begin the journey back outward, and I can prove that my stomach rumblings and my palpitating heart are real. I can prove that my fingers, toes, and arms are real. I can prove that external things in the world like chairs and cups are also real. You see, what Descartes has done is he's said, aha, I found a bedrock of certainty, a foundation upon which I can build other things. Y'all, that is why the title of the book is Meditations on First Philosophy. Descartes agrees with Aristotle that you have to find some kind of basis on which to construct other knowledge. And that basis, they both call first philosophy. Now, first philosophy means something very different in both of their systems, but they both agree on the necessity of first philosophy in order to guarantee other kinds of knowledge. For example, knowledge about birds, knowledge about human bodies, knowledge about the human soul, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? By the way, let me just say that what this means is that Descartes is a foundationalist. We're going to get to Nietzsche beginning very, very soon. And what we're going to see is that Nietzsche is not a foundationalist. Nietzsche is what you might call a post-foundationalist or a non-foundationalist, or perhaps a postmodernist, or perhaps a nihilist, okay? Good. Systematic doubt, Descartes' journey inward. Okay, I want to move on to a second big point for today's lecture, and that is, I want to talk more about the character of Descartes' subject, Descartes' mind, Descartes' ego, Descartes' cogito, Descartes' I think, therefore I am. What's going on with this notion in Descartes' work? Well, there's a couple of things that I want to say. The first one is that this, for Descartes, is the recursive thing, right? Do you remember what the recursive thing or the reflexive thing? Sorry, sometimes I say recursive, sometimes I say reflexive. They're really the same thing. I really ought to say reflexive. What was the reflexive thing that we saw in Aristotle's thought? It was thought thinking itself, aka God, aka the unmoved mover, aka theos, aka the divine, the prime mover, right? That is what Aristotle meant by this thing that's reflexive. It's both subject and object. But Descartes says, oh, no, the reflexive thing is not God. The reflexive thing is the human mind, my mind, the fact that I think about thinking, the fact that I cannot doubt that I'm thinking, the fact that even if I try to doubt that I'm thinking, I'm still thinking. So I'm thinking about thinking, okay? And real quick, I just want to say that you can see there that Descartes takes Aristotle's God and replaces it with human mind. God is out, the human mind is in for Descartes, okay? And let me put it a different way. You remember how earlier in the class I made the point that Parmenides looks at Aristotle and says, Aristotle, you thought you were talking about being, but actually you're talking about God. That's what Aristotle says to Parmenides. But here we see Descartes doing a similar thing to Aristotle. He points to Aristotle and he says, hey, Aristotle, that thing that you were talking about, high five, you're totally onto something, but actually you weren't talking about God, you were talking about mind. That is to say, human mind, okay? Because just as Aristotle says that God is defined as thought thinking itself, so Descartes says that the cogito is defined as thought thinking itself, okay? So yeah, that which for Aristotle is the reflexive thing is God. That which for Descartes is the reflexive thing is the mind. That is to say, his mind. That is to say, the human mind. Okay. And y'all, before we move on, I just want to say a few more words about this notion of reflexivity. And I have found that the best way to get this across is by talking about grammar. You remember grammar when you were like in the third grade, you started to learn about nouns and verbs and all that kind of stuff. Well, if you think about verbs, there's basically two kinds of verbs. This is true in most Western languages. You've got, first off, you have intransitive verbs and transitive verbs. What is an intransitive verb? An intransitive verb is a verb like to be or maybe to become, in which there's no action taking place. If I say that Donald Trump is president, Donald Trump is not doing anything there. He just is something. He's just being something, but there's no action that's taking place, right? But if I say that Joe Biden is going to win the election, that's actually, there's some action involved there. There's a subject and an object. The subject is Joe Biden. The object is the election. Or if I were to say something like, My wife is going to buy a cat. There's a subject, my wife, and then she's buying a cat. So you've got intransitive verbs and you have transitive verbs. With transitive verbs, there's a subject and there's action and then there's an object. That is to say, there's an actor and then an action and then an actee, okay? There's something that receives the action. If I say that I kicked the dog, I am the subject, kicking is the action, and the dog is the recipient of the action or the object, okay? So you've got a subject and you've got an object. Well, in a reflexive situation, the subject and the object are the same. So if I say that the snake eats itself, that is a reflexive verb because the subject and the object are the same. It's a transitive verb. It's not intransitive like being. Eating is an action. It's a transitive verb. There is a subject and an object. It's just that in this case, the subject and the object are the same thing. So this is called a reflexive verb. And in languages like Spanish, there is a reflexive tense. Gosh, I forget what it's called. I guess it's just called reflexive. And in Greek, you have a similar one. I think it's called, gosh, I'm forgetting. Wow, that's really bad. But like in Spanish, if I say, I bathe myself, I would say something like, if I say, I'm gonna bathe myself, I would say, me voy a bañar, bañarme, or bañarse would be the infinitive. That's a reflexive verb, okay? So what I'm trying to get you to see is that both Aristotle and Descartes have a reflexive thing. For Descartes, it's what? Mind. For Aristotle, it's what? God. When we say mind, we mean human mind, okay? But they both have a reflexive thing. They both mean the same thing by reflexivity. The subject is the object. The subject is performing an action, which the same subject then receives as an object. But for Aristotle, it's God. And for Descartes, it's the human mind or the human being. Because as we've seen, Descartes defines the human person exclusively in terms of mind, okay? Speaking of that, speaking of his anthropology, I want to continue to say a few words about Descartes' anthropology. Y'all remember what the word anthropology means, right? Anthropology is the logos of anthropos. It's the study of or a discourse about anthropos. What is anthropos? Man, or the human person. Don't get distracted by the gendered or sexist language. Anthropos is man. Anthropos is person. Anthropos is humanity, okay? So a logos of anthropos is anthropology. And I want to talk to you a little bit about Descartes' anthropology. But first, I want to review with you a little bit about Aristotle's anthropology, because who can tell me, who can remember how Aristotle defines the human person? He defines the human person, that is to say, anthropos or man. He defines the human person as a rational animal, right? A rational animal. And what you can see in that situation, rational animal, what you can see is that Aristotle defines the human person both in terms of mind or soul. Let's just say soul. That's the rational part. Aristotle says that that human beings have a rational soul. You remember how we talked about the three levels of the soul in Aristotle. You have the vegetative or nutritive soul at the bottom. Then you have the appetitive or sensate level of the soul in the middle. And then you have the rational soul at the top. Well, the way that, so Aristotle's definition of the human person, that is to say his anthropology, makes use of this notion of the rational soul, because for Aristotle, the human person is a rational animal. So the rational part captures soul. Animal captures the notion of body, right? We are animals. And so the human being is a rational animal. We are soul and body, body and soul. So for Aristotle, you are your soul and you are your body. I wish that we had more time to talk about this. If we weren't doing stuff online, we probably would, but alas, we don't. I just want you to know that for Aristotle, your body is part of who you are. But that's not true for Descartes. For Descartes, you are only your mind. So you see, what I want to say to you is that in this way, Descartes is a reductionist. Descartes takes the holistic definition of the human person in Aristotle, the fact that we are a rational animal, body and soul, soul and body, and he says, oh, no, let's just forget about the body. You are only your soul. And so you see, he's a reductionist in that way. He reduces the human person from a psychosomatic unity, a composite unity of form and matter. What does that word psychosomatic mean? Psycho, as you should know, means soul. Somatic means body. The Greek word for body is soma, S-O-M-A. So when Aristotle says that the human person is a psychosomatic unity of body and soul, what he's saying is that we are a composite unity of those two things, body and soul, matter and form, right? Descartes comes along and says, oh, no, forget about the body. Human beings aren't their body. Human beings are only their soul. He really says mind. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But you see, he's a reductionist because he takes the two constituent parts of the human person, according to Aristotle, and he gets rid of them. He gets rid of it. He reduces the human person to one element, mind/soul. And in that way, Descartes is a reductionist, okay? So if I were to ask you a question on the final exam, in what sense is Descartes a reductionist in his anthropology? You could talk about the fact that he takes Aristotle's definition of the human person as two things, body and soul, composite unity of form and matter, composite unity of body and soul, psychosomatic unity of these two elements. Descartes comes along and he takes one of these elements, body, and he says, oh, we don't need that one. He jettisons the notion of the body as a constituent part of the human person. And he says, oh, no, human beings are only soul. Except he doesn't say soul, he says mind. But you see, that's the first way in which Descartes is a reductionist. He's a reductionist because he reduces the human person to one element, namely soul. He gets rid of the body. He jettisons the body. Secondly, however, Descartes is a reductionist in a second way, because y'all, whenever Aristotle talks about the soul, there's lots and lots of different parts of the soul. Hang on. This is Aristotle's book called On the Soul. In Greek, it's called Perisuke. In Latin, it's called De Anima. And it's a wonderful, wonderful book. I think I'll show you the table of contents real quick. Before I show you the table of contents, I just want to say that for Aristotle, psychology, that is to say the study of the human soul, psychology is a part of Fuchsius. Do you remember Aristotle's order of learning? You start out with logic, and then you go to physics or Fuchsius or the realm of nature, and then you finally graduate to metaphysics, right? Logic, Fuchsius/nature, and then metaphysics. Well, Aristotle's psychology, that is to say his work on the soul, is a part of that middle region of his order of learning, that middle region of his curriculum, that middle stage called Fuchsius or physics, okay? But the point I'm trying to make to you right now is that when Aristotle talks about the soul, it has lots and lots of different parts, okay? You can call them parts, you could call them faculties, you can call them powers. Lots of parts of the soul, lots of faculties of the soul, lots of powers of the soul. Basically, Aristotle wants to say that the soul, the human soul, because we're talking about the human soul can do a lot of stuff, a lot of different things. It has lots of different potencies or powers or faculties, okay? So for example, the soul has nourishing. Guess what, y'all? That's the nutritive soul. Can you see that? Nourishing. Chapter 4, nourishing. That's the nutritive soul that we talked about that plants have. Look at chapter 5, perceiving. Can you see that? That is the appetitive / sensate soul that animals like lions and giraffes have. He talks about our sense perception, seeing, hearing, smell, taste. Next chapter is touch. That's a really good chapter, by the way. But then in book 3, he begins to talk about other things like imagination, thinking. He talks about memory. He talks about emotions. He talks about lots and lots of different powers of the soul. So think with me about the soul. There's lots of parts of the soul, right? There's the mind, there's the memory, there's the imagination, there is the will. That's something that the soul can do. The soul has the power to choose things, to will things, okay? So you've got mind, memory, imagination, will. You have heart. Ever heard of the heart? That not the organ in your body that beats, but the control center of who you are. What the heart desires. You're the love of my heart. That's not talking about an organ in your soul. That's talking about something in your soul. And Aristotle talks about that. He talks about desire. He talks about all different kinds of activities of the soul, okay? Lots of different parts of the soul, lots of different powers, faculties of the soul. But what does Descartes do? He comes along and he says, oh, no, we're not going to talk about the memory. We're not going to talk about the will. We're not going to talk about the heart. We're only going to talk about mind. And so you see, Descartes is a reductionist in a second way. Not only does he take the two parts of Aristotle's anthropology and jettisons one of them, but he also takes all the different parts of Aristotle's soul and he jettisons all of them except for one, that is to say, mind. And so you see, y'all, in these ways, Descartes is a reductionist. Now, am I being biased in this presentation of Descartes? Yes, I am. But what I'm wanting to do even more than that is to get you to think about how Descartes has been so influential in our modern world. Because guess what? Many people in our modern world assume that human beings are not constituted by their bodies. Have you ever heard the phrase, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me? I would argue that that's a way of saying, oh, your body doesn't matter. Like, you are not your body. Let me give you another example. Maybe you grew up in a Baptist church, you grew up going to Sunday school, and maybe someone said to you, here's why you need to believe in Jesus, so you'll go to heaven when you die. Well, guess what, y'all? That's a way of suggesting that the real you is your soul, not your body. Who cares about your body? You're going to die and go to heaven. Who cares about your body? Descartes is very much in that mode of thinking. Aristotle would say, oh, no. If your body doesn't go to heaven, you can't be in heaven. Why? Because you are your body. And what I want to say to you, and I will close like this, is that for traditional Christianity, people like Augustine, Aquinas, and C.S. Lewis, they agree more with Aristotle in this regard than they do with Descartes. By the way, many people would argue that Descartes is more of a Platonist in this regard. I don't have time to get into that today, but traditional Christianity and Jewish thought and Muslim thought all agree with Aristotle that human beings are body and soul. Y'all, that is why what Christians have said historically is that the great hope of the Christian life is not going to heaven when you die. That would make it seem like your body doesn't matter. All that matters is your soul being in heaven, floating on clouds, enjoying the angels or something like that. Christians historically have said, oh, no, your body also matters. Your body must also be saved. So what do we call the salvation of the body? We call it resurrection. And y'all, this is why traditional Christianity, Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, C.S. Lewis, have said that the ultimate goal of the Christian life is not simply going to heaven when you die. The ultimate goal of the Christian life is the resurrection of the body. Because when our bodies are raised, guess what? Our souls are saved, but our bodies are also saved. And I hope that you can see how this is an affirmation of Aristotle's anthropology, that the human person by its very nature, by definition, is two things, body and soul. And these two things are stitched together, woven together in a composite unity of form and matter. But traditionally, Christians have rejected, or at least Orthodox Christians have rejected the reductionist anthropology of Descartes, who thinks that human beings, by definition, are just our mind. Okay? I'm going to close even earlier than I thought that I would. And please know that on Thursday, you will need to begin to view the Nietzsche documentary. I'm going to put the Nietzsche documentary up on Canvas. It's a YouTube video. It's about an hour and a half long, and I'm going to give you 2 class periods to watch that this coming Thursday, November 5, and then also the following Tuesday, November 10, okay? So you will watch those Nietzsche videos, and then I would ask you even now to begin reading your reading of the article, The Dionysiac Worldview, which if that's not on Canvas, I will upload that tomorrow, okay? May the force be with you and also with you.